you could do everything. Like if you just worked harder, if you took one more class, if you learned one more skill, if you taught yourself how to do just one more thing, you could do all the things. I see you all shaking your heads, so hello, we are the same. When I started my business, my vision of success was that I could do everything. And why wouldn't I think that? I had this corporate career where I was that girl. I always had an answer, I always had a plan. My team could deliver on the impossible consistently. So when I started my own business, I thought it'd be the same. I could just do everything myself. I quickly learned that entrepreneurship is a different animal. And I hit a wall. In fact, it wasn't long before I was drowning in my solo success, and I couldn't save myself by power posing. So what I did have to learn was how to bring other people in to help me. And you might be thinking, well, that's revolutionary, but it is a little bit more complicated than that. You see, when we recognize that we need help, it also might make us think that we have a weakness. It might challenge our perception of ourselves and what we can do. It invites vulnerability in, because if somebody offers us help, we have to admit that we need it in order to take it. And I struggled with that, which is kind of weird because my business analytic is focused on helping managers gain mastery as people leaders. And I tell them that they need to be aware of their strengths and need to borrow what they don't have. I encourage them to be in community with one another so they can figure things out. And I remind them that leadership is not having all the answers, it's just simply knowing where to find them. And yet, here I was in my business trying to know, be, and do all the things. And if I think about it, I do know why I was doing that. I was still wrestling with something that we don't often talk about, and that is the shame in our gaps. You see, if you look closely, you can see that I'm wearing a butterfly, and that's because I am an ADD butterfly. And that means that I flitter and I float across topics and projects and tasks. And I discovered early on that there are some downsides to being a butterfly. Earlier in my career, I used to work in an L&D department with Lee Quill, and he was always impeccably dressed and well put together. It's not a show until I fall through the stage. And one day, after I had been on vacation, Lee called me into his office and he said, Kamaria, while you were out, we needed some information from your training classes, and so I went through your desk. I know, right? I discovered that you actually aren't that organized. And while I was preparing to come talk to you about that, I also remembered that during our meetings, sometimes it can seem like you're not paying attention. And that conversation made my heart stop. Because slight disorganization and the attention span of a gerbil on crack are two hallmark characteristics of an ADD butterfly. But being called out on it made me feel embarrassed and ashamed, and it made me question whether I was competent. And I didn't like that, so I decided that I was going to hide those weaknesses from people. In my desk, the part that only people could see, I only had 4 files because that's what I could manage to keep organized. And so that was the absolute most that they could get out of that file. Everything else was hidden in another drawer that was locked and only I had the key. During our team meetings, I made sure to look at every single person, or at least their forehead. And I always made sure I wrote something down, even if I was just writing down my grocery list, because then they would think that I was focused and present. And I spent a tremendous amount of time working to hide these weaknesses. But what if these weaknesses aren't actually things that we should be hiding? What if what we perceive as gaps are really just opportunities for connection and doorways for authentic collaboration? And I say authentic collaboration because, let's face it, today there is another very attractive option that makes us feel like superheroes: AI. You need a marketing plan? Ask AI. You need a full business strategy by tomorrow afternoon? Ask AI. You need 35 LinkedIn posts in 15 minutes? Ask AI. And the benefit of AI is that it gives us instant access to answers and information without making us vulnerable to other people. It protects our self-perception because we don't have to admit our gap to anybody. Chatty Cathy doesn't care. The downside to that, though, is that when we overly rely on AI, we're also robbing ourselves of the opportunity for mutual transformation when we connect to other people. Let me tell you more about that. So I have friends that are amazing at project management. They can take the loftiest of ideas and turn it into a well set of orchestrated steps with check-in points and a RACI chart that I will not use. And one day, me and one of my amazing project management friends were having a conversation. Her name is Calitris, and we started talking about business and life and my work and what I was working on. And then the next day, I received an email, and the title said, Day of Service. Because she was going to give me a day of service and lend me her project management expertise free of charge just to help. And you might be thinking, I was like, oh, that's exciting, but absolutely not. There was a feeling in the pit of my stomach, and I felt like I was having that conversation with Lee Cohen all over again. Because something in our conversation had triggered to her that I, in fact, was not great at project planning and capacity planning and milestone markers. But I pushed through that feeling, and I accepted that vulnerability, and I accepted her offer to help me. And as it turns out, I wasn't far off from where I was trying to be. We just organized a couple of things, and I realized that I was stuck because I was actually over capacity. But the real magic of that conversation happened after we stopped talking about me, because during our conversation, she also had mentioned that she was being laid off, and she didn't know what to do next. And so just like that, I switched into coach mode. And we talked about where she was going, what she wanted to do next, and how I could help her. Because while I may not be able to organize myself out of a drawer, I am a kick-ass visionary. And I can help you find your way forward, figure out where you're going, understand what your next steps could be and the possibility of your skill sets. And that's when the realization came to me that the very act of being vulnerable created an opportunity for her to bring her brilliance to me, but it also created a space for me to bring my brilliance to her. And so as we leave here today, there's a couple things I would love for you to take with you, one of which is that your gifts, your gaps, the places where you shine, the places where you struggle are nothing that you need to hide. I encourage you to think very hard about letting AI make you feel like you should be a solo warrior and tech enhanced all by yourself. And I encourage you to be vulnerable and make space for someone else to bring their brilliance to you and for you to bring your brilliance to them. Because when we do that, through that authentic human connection, we find individual success and collective brilliance.